Hello, scholars. This is Dr. Childs again. I'm coming with another lecture on Chapter 5 on oppression and power. I hope you are getting the gist of these lectures and how to use them effectively with studying for the quizzes. Someone asked me, will there be weekly quizzes? Yes, there will be weekly quizzes. There are 2 chapters at a time. So this one will be on chapters 5 and 6, the next quiz, and it'll come sometime this week. You should already be getting ready for quiz 2 here. You still have some time left to take that. I gave you a little bit more time because I got it posted late this week, but there'll be another quiz coming up soon. That'll be quiz 3, and so the idea of the lectures is just to help you through the quizzes and along with the readings, and then I can kind of give you some what we call an education teacher talk and just explaining some of these concepts. I do want to say, as I prepare for these lectures and I prepare for this class, I do a lot of research. I do scholarly research, but also I do a lot of internet research and social media research. And I just like to hear what people are saying in terms of oppression, conversations about social justice, protests, the different things that's going on, Black Lives Matter, the anti-gun movement, liberal politics, conservative politics. And I listen to what a lot of people say about social justice and race. And quite frankly, I've been a little bit disturbed the way people dismiss conversations about oppression and, gender, race, class. And there's a whole lot of people that are misinformed. And I included a video at the end of this lecture just to give you an idea of what I mean. And I know a lot of folks will listen to that video and agree with that. I'm not naive. My head is not in the sand. But I consider you to look at the scientific research. If you are approaching this class as if it's all opinion-based and that there's no real research to support what we're talking about, you're missing the whole point. There are reams and reams of books and well-researched articles to support the things that we're talking about in this class. But we're going to talk about oppression and power, okay? Let me move on. So as we move forward, it's important that we understand what is meant by the term oppression. In the video towards the end of this presentation, the young woman in the video gives a definition of oppression from the dictionary. In your own words, think about it. Jot it down on a piece of paper. I would like you to do that, or just jot it down in a blank Word document. Take some time. Just what is oppression, or what does it mean to be oppressed? What's the difference between discrimination and oppression? I want you to jot down your understanding. You're college-educated folks. You're intelligent. What's the conventional understanding of these terms? Particularly oppression is what I'm most interested in, and we've been talking about discrimination in the last few chapters, in the last chapter. But what is oppression? What is oppression? And let's move forward. It's going to be important that you write that definition down because we're going to talk further about that. Okay, so have that in mind. No right or wrong answer. Just have that in mind as we move forward. Take out on that same piece of paper, keep track of how many questions you can relate to. Not that it's a typo. On a scale of 1 to 5, rank your experience with these scenarios. Okay, so we talked about oppression. Now, a scale of 1 to 5, 1 meaning not at all, or I agree, and then 5 being strongly disagree. So this kind of a scale from 1 to 5. Have you ever felt oppressed based on your skin color? 1 being not at all or disagree. I'm getting my scales mixed up. And 5 being yes, absolutely. Okay, let's go with that. My apologies. Have you ever felt oppressed based upon your skin color? 1 being no, not at all. 5 being yes, absolutely. Question 2, have you ever felt oppressed based on your gender? 1 being not at all, never. not often, or and 5 being absolutely every single day. Um, Number 3, have you ever felt oppressed based upon your religious beliefs? 1 being not at all, 5 being absolutely. And lastly, number 4, have you ever experienced oppression based upon your socioeconomic status? 1 being not at all, 5 being absolutely. So I want you to think about the answers you have. Which ones did you score higher in? And in this term, I guess higher will be negative because you've had bad experiences. Did you score any 5s based on race? Did you score any 5s based on gender? Did you score any 5s based on religion? 5s based on socioeconomic status? Or was it all 1s? When we talk about privilege, ones that those that have mostly 1s, that's going to have to do with your privilege sometimes. And the notion of privilege has been making folks uncomfortable lately. But it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that there are people out there that have different experiences than you have, and more uncomfortable experiences sometimes. So think about that. Oppression. Think of the common definition of oppression and what you wrote down. So I told you to write it down and think about it. And I've said this before. Refer to the roaming millennial video at the end of this presentation. Once we get there, then I'll give you some specific questions about that. To hold a group down. I'm sorry that my formatting is looking strange here, but oppression is to hold a group down and deny a social group full access and potential in a given society. So here, with the sociological definition, we're thinking about it in terms of group. Holding a group down, deny access to jobs. It could be school, could be college, it could be housing. So in this way, oppression is not always like, for example, the Holocaust, where the Jews were oppressed by the Nazi regime. That's a type of oppression too, but we're not going to limit it to like outright violent oppression like slavery and Jim Crowism. But here, oppression can be systematic when you're dealing with a social group that's been denied full access, like voting rights or something. There are 2 involved groups with oppression: dominant group and the minoritized group. I hope you remember those words because we've been talking about those last time as well. Those terms, I should say. Remember those terms: dominant group and minoritized group. Prejudice leads to discrimination. So if I'm prejudiced against women as a professor, which is not the case, I try to do my best to be equitable and treat everybody right. But if I'm prejudiced against women, it's going to spill over to the classroom in terms of how I treat them and how I call on them and the grades I assign, which equals discrimination. But I have to have power in order to be prejudiced, for my prejudice to really stick. And see, here's the thing. A lot of times people say, well, I'm a white person and I experience just as much prejudice that by black people against me. That may be how you feel, but for so many years, African Americans, even still, they're not in a position of power. So their prejudice is not going to have as much effect on white society, especially since white males, for example, own most of the Fortune 500 companies. White males have been the president, with the exception of Obama. There have been no women presidents. Most of the high-level positions in the country are held by white men. So therefore, they're going to have more institutional power, and their prejudice and discrimination is going to be more impactful, have a greater impact than the flip side, where African Americans do not have access to that much power. The same with Hispanics, so therefore their prejudice and discrimination will not have the same results. So you have to have power. Prejudice plus power equals oppression. Prejudice and discrimination describe dynamics that occur on the individual level. oppression occurs when one group's prejudice is backed by legal authority. That's what we're getting at with the scenarios I gave with the Caucasian race, the European Americans having the power. Now, let me pause and say this class is not about let's indict white America. A lot of folks are resentful, and then the way it goes out in terms of rhetoric is these classes, I shouldn't have to apologize for being white. I shouldn't have to feel bad for being white. This class is not about that. So, if that's your notion of this class, you're mistaken. You shouldn't ever have to apologize for who you are and how you were born and those kinds of things. That's not what this class is about. It's just about recognizing privilege and oppression in our society and trying to bring about some justice, some social justice, and level the playing field. Oppression occurs when one group's prejudice is backed by, look at this, legal authority and historical, social, and institutional power. Okay, so we're going to get more to that. This word was new to me when I started teaching this class and when I started reading on this particular topic. The ideology that males and male experiences are the standard for human, and females and female experience are a deviation from the norm. So like when they say mankind, for example, women's basketball being called women's basketball because it's separate from normal men's basketball. So, we should say humankind instead of mankind. I remember when we had a female wrestling team at our school. It's called the Wrestlettes. So, or they have like lingerie football. It's different from the normal football. You understand what I mean? Social stratification is another important word. Now, keep in mind, this class is more of a sociology class and social theory. And so these items are not opinion, and I want you to move away from that, to thinking that class is about social justice. It's just about opinion, and it's not well researched. You're very, very much mistaken. There are people that are hired by the government to do this kind of research, to look at statistics on race and gender and class. There are people that have devoted their entire career and are tenured professors, I guess including myself, that do research. We go all over the country and sometimes all over the world. I've been in various countries doing this kind of work. So you should take it seriously because it affects us all. Social stratification. Here's another idea that I want you to get. The idea that society is organized into groups in unequal fashion. The idea that unequal value and power is arbitrarily assigned to different groups, often based on race, class, and gender. So, for example, power just is assigned to males. Male authority, that's arbitrary. That's a social construct. But at the same time, I would also, I have a religious background, and I said this on purpose. I know I may have some atheists or different types of religious folks in the class, but the religion teaches that, or certain religions teach that the male is the head, and some folks are not comfortable with that. But that's a position of power. That's where power is assigned to a male. Maybe you're in a home that, the women that you look at your husband as the head of the household. Even when we are filling out paperwork, they say head of the household. And often we have this notion of the male. Another issue where power is arbitrarily subscribed is to white folks. And black folks are looked at as criminals, and inferior, and not as intelligent. These are all power dynamics. So that's what social stratification is all about. Same with class. We look at lower class people as not as important. There are 4 key elements that Cecil and D'Angelo indicate as it relates to oppression. Oppression is historical. So, for example, underrepresentation of women in government, like the presidency, okay? Oppression is ideological. Not all women believing that women's suffrage was important. That's ideological. Okay, so that's a thought process that has been perpetuated throughout history. Oppression is institutional. Men dominating every group capable of granting women's suffrage. Oppression is cultural. Male culture domination society. Uh, so male culture's domination of society. Excuse me for that typo there. Hope that makes sense to you. The patriarchal system. We're here to learn. So internalized dominance, internalizing and acting out often unintentionally. The constant messages circulating in the culture that you and your group are superior to the minoritized group and thus entitled to your higher position. She only got that job over me because she's black, or lacking interest. For example, lacking interest of other cultures except for your own benefit. That's called interest conversion in critical race theory studies. Own child experiencing diversity, or so the only way you're interested in African American issues if your own child is experiencing diversity, or in controlled doses, cultural holidays. So only time you really care is on Black History Month or Martin Luther King. Or the only reason, what I'm saying about your own child, maybe you have a biracial child or something, or your niece is biracial, so now you care. So that's interest conversion. So what in the text talks about this? Often the only time Caucasian people care about African Americans' rights is if it benefits them, and we have to go beyond that. Um, and this superiority that European Americans have is sometimes troubling, because they'll say things like, in such and such year, whites will be the minority. Why is there such an interest in that? If we don't care about race, why do we care whether whites will be in the minority or not? Is that scary to you? Why is that so troubling to you when people of color have been in the minority all this time? So think these are some tough questions that I want you to think about as we go through this class. But there is a notion that white is superior. Even the language, like the standard, they say other people speak incorrectly, and whiteness is the standard, is considered normal. Like people say, I'm a normal person, I'm a normal girl, I'm a normal boy. They mean, I'm white, I'm an average American. They mean white. And not average American is a black person or Hispanic. So just think that through. Not trying to offend you, so I don't want you to just shut down. So thank you for your patience. Um, internalized oppression. Internalizing and acting out often unintentionally. So prejudice does not have to be intentional. That's what I want you to walk away from this class. Because people say, I don't have prejudice bone in my body and I'm not trying to be racist, or I'm not racist. I'm choosing not to be racist. But often you are racist because you are racist without even realizing it. The constant message is that you and your group are inferior to the dominant group, thus deserving of your lower position. So often, I've convoluted this one. I got caught up in saying something else, but internalized racism or internalized oppression is when the subordinate group feels like they deserve to be treated a certain way. Like women will say, well, men have all the power anyway, or they're smarter than us. So it's like when they concede to that negative position. Criticizing members of your own group who do not assimilate to the dominant norms. Pull up your pants, or believing the dominant group members are more qualified and deserving than you. Like when African Americans feel that whites are smarter than them, or women feel like they can't do the work that men are doing. This is another one of those sociological terms. The control of the ideology of a society. The dominant group maintains the power by imposing their ideology on everyone else through myths, stories, explanations, definitions, and rationalizations used to justify inequality between the dominant and minority groups. So a lot of the, for example, movies that show African Americans as thugs and criminals, as rapists, only perpetuates the stereotypes. A lot of the songs that are popular in the hip hop movement, they glorify African American deviance. They show women being sexually provocative, so black women being sexually provocative. And when white society see these things over and over again, they begin to believe that all black folks are that way. That's what I mean by ideology refers to the myths, stories, and explanations and definitions. So this is hegemony, the control of ideology of a society. What group controls the ideology? And that's the European American groups. They get to control the narrative. Same with males. And many times I don't realize I'm being oppressive to females as a male, so I have to watch that myself. This is the last slide. This is the video I've been referring to the whole time. The first video, I want you to watch it. It's going to be a lot of rebuttals against what we're talking about. But I'll just be candid. It's not scientifically researched. The young lady is obviously highly intelligent. She's articulate, but it's not very factual based. The reason I want to show you this is I want us to learn. I'm trying to teach you the notion of being a scholar, a more astute scholar, research based answers. She talks about facts, but she is not very well versed in the topic, and it can be really fooling, because it can be really fool us because she sounds so articulate. She may even be college educated, but I would just give you a hint and say she hasn't studied this material. She hasn't studied this body of research. And then I've provided the second video as this individual actually gave a rebuttal to her. And he challenged her to go and answer back. What I want you to do, first give your thoughts and reaction. You can agree with what she's saying in A. If this is right up your alley, this speaks to your heart, say that. But then in B, I want you to rebut it. Give a rebuttal. Then C, I want you to watch the second video as well. And as you watch it, you're permitted to use that information in your rebuttal. But I also want you to respond to that second video as well. That's C. So you'll find a space to post this in this week's module. Thank you for paying attention and checking in. I hope this is helpful for you. Until we talk again, have a good one and have a good week.